And I would also like to tell that I'm very proud to have the opportunity to sit on this committee with you, with the different parties, to work on official languages. Since I was young, my parents taught me that our official languages are central to our identity as a country and as Canadians. And I look forward to working with you on this very important topic on behalf of Canadians. I have a few announcements to read out, and then I'll move on to the agenda and we'll be able to pursue our work. So welcome to meeting number 2 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Official Languages. Before we begin, I would like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. You will also notice a QR code on the card, which links to a short awareness video. Today's meeting will be taking place in a hybrid form. For those participating virtually, please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please put your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. I would like to remind participants of the following points. First of all, please wait till I recognize you before speaking. All comments must be addressed through the chair. I would also ask members to raise their hand if you wish to speak, whether you are participating in person or via Zoom. The committee clerk and myself will do our best to manage the order of speakers. And what I've just said is important, not only to maintain the order, but also to assist our interpreters to have just one person speaking at a time. So as regards our agenda for today, we are dealing with committee business, which we are going to be working on today. The subcommittee report was distributed to the committee members yesterday, and today we're meeting to discuss that report. So I would like to propose that we begin by talking about this report. And then if there are any other topics that the people wish to discuss regarding the committee's work, we could discuss that afterwards. Is that all right? Fine. So the committee's report was distributed. So does the committee wish to approve the report, or are there some members that wish to speak? Marion? Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of all the members who are new here, it's customary for us to proceed in the subcommittee for the planning of what's to be done in the fall, and this was done Thursday, together with Guillaume Deschênes-Thériault, my colleague, and Mario Beaulieu of the Bloc, yourself, Chair, the analyst, the clerk, and myself. And this corresponds entirely to what was discussed during our meeting on Tuesday. So I propose that we approve this plan so that we can move ahead next week already to begin our meetings in order to advance our cause. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joël and Mario. Yes, I have 2 amendments I would like to propose. First of all, in the prioritization, we know that French is threatened in Quebec more than ever, as is the case throughout Canada, and all indicators of language indicate that French is declining. And even the provisional study of Statistics Canada shows that French, as the use in Quebec homes, will go from 81.6% in 2011 to 73.6% in 2036. This was 83.1% in 2001, and the last census in 2021 demonstrates that it has reached 79.1%. And these forecasts have been done in a context where migration was lower than what we saw for a number of years. So these are forecasts that are very likely too optimistic. And we've seen in recent years Liberal ministers who have recognized the decline of French, that French is threatened everywhere, and that there are 8 million Francophones surrounded by 360 million Anglophones in Canada and in North America. These aspects have been raised in part in the new Act, Official Languages Act, even though there was a backsliding, so that rather than adopting and promoting French only in Quebec. They came back to the former concept that was done in parallel to promote Anglophones in Quebec as a minority. And finally, we've looked at the plan of action for 2023-28. There's nothing new in there, nothing new for French. All of it is for promoting English in Quebec. And I looked at the public accounts of 2023 through 24, and it's the same thing. I haven't seen anything for French in Quebec, or virtually nothing. It's 100 million per year. If we look since the beginning of the Official Languages Act, we've reached more than 3.6 billion in constant dollars. That's more than 5.5 billion, contributing to anglicizing Quebec. So I believe that the study on the measures for the promotion of French, we'll see what will come, but that ought to be given priority and it ought to be handled first. So I want to know, I would like to so move. So will my colleagues agree? I have another amendment to present after that. I don't know if you. Well, I'll consult the clerk. So what I would ask is that we have one motion at a time, just so everyone is clear. Could you please state exactly what you're moving? What I'm moving is that as of now, the motion to study what will be or what have been the measures for the promotion and protection of French in Quebec. That's in the act, but there's nothing that's been done. So as of now, this study has been placed last. It seems to me that for the Liberals and the Conservatives regarding French in Quebec, that comes last. So I think it ought to be given priority, and we should begin with that. Okay, so you're moving that we begin with that study. Okay. Mr. Godin. Thank you, Chair. With all the respect I have for my colleague, I also acknowledge the decline of French, and not only in Quebec, because we're in a federal parliament where there are 10 provinces and 3 territories where there are Francophone communities in all of those parts of the territory. So I think it is important. And we must keep in mind that we concluded the 44th legislature with a study that was on the continuum in education. We need to have an overall and national vision. And I would not like to look down on any organizations anywhere in Canada, including Quebec, as regards brushing aside that study. I think that as a priority, it's important to conclude that study. And perhaps we have 4 to 6 more meetings to be done, if I remember correctly, Madam Clerk. So I think it's important there was a process that was undertaken. So what my colleague is asking for is that we scrap all of that and that we only think about Quebec and the decline of French in Quebec. The decline of French is taking place throughout Canada. And I think it is important for us to be able to conclude. And unfortunately, in this situation, there is a habit, and I think it's legitimate to be aware of the intent of the stakeholders in bilingualism in the Official Languages Act. And there are 2 ministers who were called in, the Minister of Official Languages and the the President of Treasury Board. And I think it's important to hear them. And we've demonstrated our openness by proposing and by accepting the study. But as regards the prioritization, we don't have the same vision. So I do not agree with that motion. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Mr. Deschênes-Thériault. Thank you, Chair. I fully agree on the importance of the measures to protect and promote French throughout Canada. We acknowledge the issue of the decline of French, and we certainly have to focus on that. And that's why I believe that in the subcommittee, we agreed to accept the motion, the proposed study proposed by the bloc, and we wanted it to be pan-Canadian. We modified it because in each province and territory, we have to focus on protection and promotion of French. And considering the importance of the subject, we adopted that in our order of priority. However, we agreed to conclude the education issue, which is as fundamental, because education is where do people acquire language and culture. It's important in the Francophone minority context. The issue of education. There is some work in substance in the 44th legislature that was done. Stakeholders and communities who appeared or are waiting to appear. I believe that they're waiting with interest on the conclusions of our committee. So the order that we propose, I believe, does not remove anything and does not reflect the degree of importance. We acknowledge the importance of the protection of French. However, I suggest that we maintain the proposed order of the business. So I suggest that we deal with the education, digital and AI, and the effect on official languages, including French, which is affected, which is an important subject of the day. And these are important topics. I propose that we maintain the order as proposed. Thank you. Mr. Bolduc, if you will allow. As for the Bloc Québécois, the issue of Francophones outside of Quebec is very important, which is why I agreed once again, because it looks like it's an allergy. People never want to focus in on Quebec. Point of order, Chair. Chair, I believe that my colleague doesn't have to attribute intentions to us because we are a federal government that is responsible for the entire Canadian territory. I ask him to withdraw his remarks. I don't see in what way I attributed intentions. I talked about facts. I presented the first study that was done on the promotion of French in a few years ago. This was very lengthy. We had to include francophones from outside Quebec and include anglophones. And finally, it was prorogued and it took 2 or 3 more elections for us to finalize it. And then once the new act was read through clause by clause and we finished that, ultimately, to me, I consider that if everyone is acting in good faith, which I presume, then I am prepared to make a concession and to show some openness that we continue the study on the continuum, but that we continue with the study on the promotion of French in Quebec. Because if French continues to decline in this way in Quebec, it's going to be harmful to all Francophones outside of Quebec, whether they're the Acadians or the Franco-Ontarians. It's the same cause. But Quebec is where 90% of the Francophones are. And since the beginning of official languages, the Canadian government has just been promoting English in Quebec. It's as though where French is the strongest, they're working to weaken it. So I think that that has lasted long enough. We have to move on to something else. So what I propose is that at this stage, let us continue studying the issue of Quebec after the continuum on education. We're still on the point of order, Mr. Godin. Actually, I had concluded on the point of order. It was to continue on his comment. I understand that he does not withdraw his words, which I respect is quite legitimate, but I wish to continue, Chair. We're putting the cart before the horse because we have to be realistic. This fall, in the project that was tabled, there's the end of the study on the continuum, the meeting with the president of the Treasury Board, the meeting with the Minister of Official Languages, the study on artificial intelligence. And there also is something that we have to keep in mind as a priority. We need to change our schedule to study the standing orders. And I think, and I hope, Chair, that in the standing orders, there will be some tools for us to use to counteract the importance of halting the decline of French everywhere in Canada, including Quebec. Now, the standing orders are going to come out this fall. So I suggest that we wait to see what's going to be written in the standing orders. I have confidence after 3 years. I think they've probably sharpened their pencils and will come up with a good set of orders. I'm crossing my fingers. And now I remain with the position of what was discussed and tabled today. And I'm quite comfortable with what the subcommittee has proposed. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So I would like to ask for a moment to consult the clerk.
Okay. Donc j'ai Monsieur.
So, Mr. Dalton and then Ms. Jeanette. I am pleased to be here once again. I'm an MP from British Columbia, so I think, speaking of the motion, from Mario. We have to have a vision of the entire country where there's a decline everywhere. I found that, for example, last year, there were a number of studies going at the same time. So it was a bit confusing. So for us, it's better to be more systematic. For example, wind up the study that we began on the continuum in education. Continue that, and then after that, do the other studies, in my opinion. Thank you. Ms. Jeanette? Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to be part of this committee, which is so important to our official languages. I'm proudly a Quebecer, and from a viewpoint of working well around the table, you have to understand that as Quebecers at the table, we represent also our federation. So the concern for both languages and French in Quebec is of particular importance for me. But as the colleagues mentioned, it's important here for us to represent the issues of all of Canada as regards the French language community. So I support what was mentioned by my colleagues of the Conservatives. And yes, I would say it was mentioned, and we agree regarding education, but from a viewpoint that we all accepted. And in fact, I congratulate you for the preparatory work that was done by the committee, because these are important moments for us to simplify our life here in the committee. The subcommittee did an excellent job to come up with that proposal that has been introduced. So dealing with the digital side of things, and I understand the importance of discussing the impact of it throughout Canada for our languages as Francophones. But there's a major change in happening in the digital sphere. And instead of waiting until afterwards to see what the impact is, I think it's important for us to have that discussion before, so that we have some reflections about what's going on regarding the impact of the digital sphere. And do we have the leverage to have that discussion afterwards? That's why I like the order that we set, because sure, there are the standing orders we're going to look at, or the regulations, and there's this change in our society that's going to have an impact on our language. So is it favorable or unfavorable? And then we can have a discussion afterwards. And that's why I support the order in which the proposals were put by the subcommittee, because this is going to enable us to avoid going back and forth if we have to talk about the digital sphere afterwards. Ms. Boyle? It's been several years now that the bloc has been coming back to this point. Up until now, the federal government has only strengthened English. In fact, anglicizing Quebec in the Official Languages Act anglicizes Quebec by means of its support of official languages. It includes subsidies, which virtually exclusively are used for English. So here, French is losing ground and continues to lose ground. And the more they gain time in that way, the more it's going to continue. So there are going to be measures taken. So here we're saying the continuum. So I agree, we can finish the study, but after that, we're going to put in artificial intelligence and so on. And the ministers are going to give us their dates. It could fit into the studies that they're going to do. But at any rate, I maintain my proposal, and I move that we vote if no one else wants to speak. If there are no further comments, then we can vote. All right. Shall we vote? Madam Clerk, voting on Mr. Beaulieu's amendment. Ms. Jeanette?
Monsieur Deschênes-Thériault.
Contre.
Madame Mingarelli.
Contre.
Monsieur Villeneuve.
Contre.
Monsieur Gill.
Monsieur Dalton?
Monsieur Dalton.
Contre.
Monsieur Godin.
Against.
Against. Sorry,
Monsieur
it's the
Gill
first
aussi, again.
meeting.
C'est bon. Madame Conans.
Against.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Pour.
Un pour, 8 contre.
1 for, 8 against.
Oui, je déclare la motion rejetée.
I declare the motion defeated. Mr. Beaulieu for a second one. The second amendment is on the motion regarding the interpreters. We agree with that motion, and we would like to, as soon as possible, I know that there's a new contract coming out, and the interpreters and the Association of the Interpreters, the International Association, is concerned about this new measure because probably there are going to be fewer requirements, and the quality of the interpretation, which often is not sufficient, will go down even more. So that's quite urgent. And once this has been dealt with, it'll be very difficult to backtrack or to change it. So I would like to raise an amendment. I would like to take out as soon as possible. And I would like to add, provided the meeting is held by Tuesday, October 7th at the latest.
On peut vous l'envoyer par écrit, si vous voulez.
We can send it to you in writing, if you wish.
Si vous pouvez l'envoyer, ce serait utile. Merci.
Okay, well, if you can send it, thank you. To the clerk, yes. Yes, I'm sending it.
Monsieur Beaulieu,
Is that all, Mr. Beaulieu? Are there any comments concerning what has just been moved by Mr. Beaulieu?
Vous me situez, Madame l'analyste?
If the analyst could help me with this, I don't see that in the report. Where is that? We sent it by email. No, the one on the interpreters. Okay, 1B. Excuse me. Yes,
Excusez-moi, parce que
my apologies. I had lost my place. We have to get back into it. It's our first few meetings. So, Chair, I share the opinion of my colleague, and I'm pleased that that motion was raised to study the situation regarding the interpreters and the importance for us as parliamentarians to have access to this service, because as long as we have a Canadian Parliament and a bilingual country with French and English, I think that all parliamentarians must have access to the interpretation service. And this service is something that we've been experiencing in recent years, which has decreased not in quality, but in quantity. And we have learned this summer that the government had gone ahead with a call for tenders. And as my colleague mentioned from the Bloc Québécois, this call for tenders could tie our hands. And my reading of it is that as of January 2026, this would occur. So I think it's important. Now there's some flexibility regarding the date. Perhaps we would have to look at the possibilities with the clerk and with the availability of the ministers. But putting the 7th down in written in stone, is that a date which is non-negotiable? I understand. And I put forward the motion, but I share what my colleague said, but I'm flexible regarding the 7th or maybe a couple of meetings afterwards. So I wanted to share that. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Ms. Chenette, once again, on our part, we're fully in agreement with this discussion regarding the interpreters, which is very important for all of us. Now, I also share the concern because imposing the date of October 7th, to me, of course, it has to be done in October. And then we can certainly see, as regards the agenda, to have the representatives, because of course there's a lot of things happening at the same time. So whether it's flexible, is it really October 7th? We're open to the discussion. It would be quite soon in October. Mr. Godin, my colleague invites me to look at the calendar, and we have to keep in mind that we're September 25th. There's no committee on the 30th. There will be one session on the 2nd and then the 7th. Except that we have to look at the calendar, and we need to, we have Minister Guilbeault that has to appear and Minister Ali before the 7th. So it's mathematically impossible. So that's why I encourage my colleague to perhaps broaden or extend it. I'm just making a suggestion. I'm not close to this, but I would suggest October 23rd, Thursday, October 23rd. Between the 7th and the 23rd, is there some way to? Sure, I'm open. I would say, because there's quite a good chance that the ministers, as we've seen in the past, often they refuse or they delay. So what we could do is say
Avec comme objectif que
with the goal of having the meeting take place before October or by October 7th. Sorry, I made a mistake. It's not October 7th, it's November 7th that the minister has to appear. Excuse me, I just noticed that, my mistake. If we absolutely want to have more flexibility, then we can put, sure, October 16th. Well, what do you think? It's an objective by the 21st, because the week of the 13th, we're not sitting. So Tuesday, the 21st, by Tuesday, October 21st. Before we continue, I'd just like to clarify what you're moving. You're moving that the study, that the meeting on the topic of the interpreters be done by October 21st at the latest. Is that right, Mr. Deschanteriot? Yes, that's along the lines of what the subcommittee proposed. We discussed having it in early October in between the education ones. So if we have guests to be added, the ones for the interpreters could be invited at the same time as we do the education, so that we can send out the invitations at the same time as for the education. So we will be favorable to October 21, as our colleague, Mr. Beaulieu, proposed. We'll see, but if we can do that before, because there's a risk that October 21st will be too late. And the regulations, if the government makes its proposal before October 21st, then it'll be too late. So I would like to ask the clerk to read out the new statement or the new language that's proposed. Yes, thank you, Chair. So with the amendment from Mr. Beaulieu, the sub-amendment, and with the sub-amendment as moved, it would read, in accordance with Section 103F of the Standing Orders, the Standing Committee on Official Languages hold a meeting lasting 2 hours to examine the situation surrounding the renewal of the interpreter's contract, provided that the meeting be held at the latest Tuesday, October 21st. There's no change to what follows, so I won't read the rest. Does everyone agree with the motion as amended, the amendment? A question of procedure, Chair. Having an amendment, a person cannot sub-amend one's own amendment. Isn't that correct, Madam Clerk?
Monsieur Gaudin. C'est ma...
You're quite right, Mr. Godin. It's one of my first meetings as chair, so I move the sub-amendment to the amendment. That's just a matter of procedure. Thank you. We'll accept that. Any other comments on this topic? We agree then on the change? Very well. Are there any further comments to the report of the subcommittee?
On va voir.
At any rate, we'll see. But because it's a public meeting, the people of Quebec who are watching closely, a number of times now, the study on the promotion of French and the measures have been postponed and postponed. So we'll see if it's placed last once again, and we'll see when it's going to be done. Thank you. Ms. Jeanette, I would like to state that indeed we are all aware at the table here, and we have heard that indeed the position of French in Quebec and throughout Canada is something important, and that we also need to look in our order of priority what is going to contribute to an even richer discussion in order to debate that topic, which we all agree must be dealt with this year. So if there are no further speakers, what I would suggest is that if the committee is ready to approve the report of the subcommittee, are we ready? Unanimous consent? You abstain? Because of priorities. One moment. I'd like to consult.
Donc, avant de...
Well, before proceeding, yeah, I'd like to speak. Oh, that's all? Okay. We have two options. We can approve the report with dissidents. That's an option, or we can move ahead with a recorded vote. Recorded vote, very well. Madam Clerk, a recorded vote, please. Thank you, Chair.
Monsieur Deschaines-Thériault,
Oui.
Madame Mingarelli,
Oui.
Monsieur Villeneuve,
Oui.
Monsieur Godin,
Oui.
Monsieur Dalton,
Oui.
Monsieur Gill,
In favor.
Madame Conans,
In favor.
Monsieur Beaulieu.
Je m'abstiens.
Parfait. 8 pour, une abstention.
8-4 with one abstention. Thank you very much. So the report of the subcommittee is approved. Are there any other topics that the colleagues wish to discuss? Mr. Godin. Chair, it's not part of my habit, and I don't want to catch anyone off guard, but I had an opportunity to look over the topic with my colleagues, and I would ask for unanimous consent to file a motion on the floor. Do I have to read out the motion before so that they can make a decision? Madam Clerk, I would like to ask you the question.
Donc, Monsieur Godin,
Okay, Mr. Godin. Seeing as we're discussing committee business, we do not need unanimous consent to introduce the motion. However, I would ask you, if you decide to introduce it, I would ask you to please provide it in writing to the clerk and read it out as well.
En fait, Monsieur le Président, puis je veux rassurer.
Actually, Chair, I would like to reassure my colleagues it's not something I habitually do to proceed this way. But as we said, we're at the beginning and there have been some staff changes and the seat behind me for the person assisting me is empty. So if there are any people available to come and work at the Official Languages Committee to help MP Godin to do his job properly, it's a half-time assignment, please contact my office. But anyway, the ad is out there. Our employee, well, and the job is announced. So anyway, to the heart of the issue, last week there was an article which mentioned that Cogeco wants to broadcast less Francophone music. Following that, it is a reality, and considering that I come from the radio telecommunications sector, I'm aware that it's an issue, economically speaking, but I'm not prepared to reduce the proportion when we're in a context of French declining in Quebec, as is the case throughout Canada. So I encourage the committee to deal with the following motion, that in accordance with Section 108(3)(f) of the Standing Orders, the Standing Committee on Official Languages hold a meeting as soon as possible for 2 hours to examine the situation concerning the recent application by the Cogeco Group to reduce the quotas of Francophone songs currently required in their broadcast license, and that the committee here in this meeting, the representatives of broadcasters such as Cogeco, Bell, RNC, and or Leclerc Communications, and that a representative of La Disc, the Quebec Association of the Disc Industry and Shows and Video, that this meeting have the objective of understanding the current situation and assess other solutions to fulfill the objective of halting the decline of French. Chair, I think it's important for us to consider this. It's a problem that has lasted for a number of years, and now there may be some other opportunities. And I think it's in the interest of the objective that we share, all of us here in the committee, to ensure that measures are brought in to halt the decline of French. And then it's a very specific case, which is very much a matter of current events, COGECO appearing before the CRTC. And I think that along the same lines as my colleague mentioned regarding urgency, it's not an exhaustive study that would take up a lot of time, but I think we can include it, and perhaps it could fill or facilitate the work of our clerk in terms of planning. So I think it's important, and we're not there to attack broadcasters. We're there to find solutions with them, whether it be profitable or acceptable for them, but never by attacking the French language and French music. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Mr. Godin, there are two other colleagues, and if the colleagues wish to suspend, yes, okay, we will suspend.
on recommence la rencontre.
So we are starting up again. And before we start to continue the discussion on the topic, I'd like to mention that at 12:30, they will be raising the Franco-Ontario flag. I know that several MPs here would like to be present. So it, of course, is the decision of the committee, but I wanted us to be aware of that and, if possible, to resolve the issues that are remaining on the agenda. That would be great so that we could be present for the raising of the flag. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Villeneuve. Thank you. It's my first time here in this committee. Thank you. I know that there are a lot of people with lots of experience here. I'd like to say from the get-go that I'm a defender of both official languages. I come from the Limoilou neighborhood in Quebec. I'm a francophone, so we're maybe not too far from each other. And I was hearing Mr. Godin say, it's rare that I arrive at the last minute with emotion, but Mr. Godin, I have to tell you that I'm in favor of what you propose. I think it's extremely important to have a high percentage of French content in our media. I might give the floor, following myself, to Guillaume. Guillaume, we might have a few amendments to propose. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree on the motion, but we would like to propose the following amendment to add point C, that the
Tel que Netflix, Amazon.
that we hear from Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., the representative of community radio in Canada, community radios in Canada. And I think an email was sent to the clerk with this amendment proposal. The reason for that, so that was the proposal for the amendment, but the reason for it is that it would allow us to broaden the thinking. What is our view of online broadcasters, and the alliance of community radios is so that it covers the whole of the country, because community radios are everywhere in Canada. So that is our proposed amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Dalton, and then Mr. Beaulieu.
Je comprends pas
The amendment, I don't understand how it's going to work to control the percentage of music, songs online, because everyone can choose. So I'm not sure. It's confusing to me.
Beaulieu.
I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu.
Francophones au Québec demandent de diminuer le
The broadcasters, francophone, the broadcasters in Quebec, well, there's a reduction of francophone content. It shows the emergency of the situation, the urgency of the situation. I have an amendment to propose. I'd like to invite Netflix and others. So, but I didn't quite understand what that was about. Well, no, there's a bit of confusion in terms of C. It's the online broadcasters in terms of their francophone quota, their obligations with regards to francophone content. That was the idea of the amendment. But if you're in agreement, I would just say online broadcasters. So we could say in terms of francophone content, not necessarily francophone songs. So online broadcasters with regards to their to the francophone content. So I would maybe propose an amendment that reads at least one meeting. If we invite several guests, then we need at least one meeting. Yes, that's good. So before continuing, I'd like to clarify something one more time, just to follow the rules. Mr. Godin told me that there are rules to follow. We're learning together. So, Mr. Deschênes-Thériault, can you please clarify what your original amendment is? So, online broadcasters, for instance, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., And the idea is that also to include a representative of community radio. I'd like to clarify point C to say online broadcasters, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., with regards to their Francophone content. I'm trying to think out loud. Mr. Godin, I think, had a suggestion with regards to that. What I'd like to ask to clarify is that right now we can only discuss the amendment and not heard by the interpreter. Mr. Chair, I think
Consulter des diffuseurs.
the idea of consulting broadcasters that are not necessarily affected by this, we have to clarify in terms of online broadcasters. Are you talking about Francophone content? That eliminates those who are not in that sphere. But I would like Mr. to add that the request is relevant, because if you read the objective of that study, this mini study, the objective is to find solution avenues, is to work together with people, with artisans, to see how we can bring about a greater presence of the French language. I wouldn't put Netflix. I would just say online broadcasters of Francophone content. That way, it's a wide. We cast a wide net. So I'm proposing a sub amendment to the amendment. Well, we have to follow the real rules of procedure, of course. Madam Clerk, are you clear in terms of the original amendment that was proposed?
Donc, merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc, si je
Thank you. If I've understood correctly, the point C was online broadcasters, for instance, Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc. But the sub-amendment of Mr. Godin would be to take off Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc., and to replace it by online broadcasters of Francophone content. For D, I wonder if you could repeat D of your initial proposal, a representative of the ARCC, which is the Alliance of Community Radio. But right now we're just dealing with this sub-amendment.
Oui, excuse-moi. OK, so Monsieur Deschênes-Thériault avait la parole.
So Mr. Deschênes-Thériault was at the floor, or do you wish to speak? No? Okay, Mr. Godin? Mr. Chair, in fact, I heard around me a comment that was very relevant from my colleague from the Bloc Québécois. The broadcasters from the Community Radio Alliance that broadcast Francophone content.
La RC, les francophones en situation minoritaire, donc c'est une organisation francophone.
But it is a Francophone organization. It's a minority language radio, Community Radio Alliance since 1990. We don't need to add it. It is a Francophone organization. But in terms of the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Godin, I think that... Oh, Madeleine?
Donc, ce que je vais demander, Madame Chenette.
What I'm going to ask, I'll give you the floor in a moment. But once again, we have to follow the rules of procedures. I'd like to ask Madam Clerk to explain where we're at right now. We had an amendment and then a sub-amendment, and now we have to discuss the sub-amendment. So could you please clarify that? Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, so now we are on the sub-amendment from Mr. Godin, which was to add, replace, for example, Netflix, Amazon Prime with French language broadcasters. So that's what's in front of the committee right now. And after that, we'll return to the amendment from Mr. Deschênes-Thériault as amended or not, depending on the decision from the committee. And then there could be other sub-amendments. What I would propose is that we deal with this sub-amendment, either approve it or not. And then after that, if you want to make other sub-amendments, you may do so. Madame Chenette, you have the floor. I'm not sure what the sub-amendment is, but it's just a clarification. with online broadcasters of French language content, does that mean that they only provide French language content, or is it better to say online broadcasters that include French language content? Because if we of French language content, does that mean that they broadcast only French language content? That's what I'm wondering about. I'm those with Francophone content. So I don't know if you can adjust your sub amendment. Chair, that's exactly what I wanted to say. So I'd like to say that in my sub amendment, it would say with. So it's a very important distinction. It would be up to us as parties to identify which witnesses we want to hear. One moment, and I'll ask the clerk.
OK. Donc, je vais.
All right. I'll try. And Madam Clerk, perhaps you can help me if I make a mistake. We're on item C of the amendment presented by MP Ontario. On C, it says online broadcasters of, with the sub amendment as proposed, online broadcasters of French language content. That's it. That was, if indeed, that would be paragraph C with the sub amendment as moved by Mr. Godin. Now, if we wish to add what you proposed, Ms. Jeanette, we could, I'll check with the clerk, we could adopt that sub amendment and then make another sub amendment to add what you propose. So, or we could defeat the sub amendment and then somebody could come forward with, well, Mr. Godin, I'll give you the floor. Chair, I propose that we ask unanimous consent to defeat my sub amendment and let Ms. Jeanette move her sub amendment.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. Donc,
Thank you very much. All right, so we defeat the sub amendment. Are there any other sub amendments?
Oui.
Yes, yes.
En ligne avec du contenu francophone.
Online broadcasters with Francophone content.
discussion.
Okay, we had our discussion.
Avec.
We have unanimous consent to withdraw the motion. Okay, ask the clerk to read out the new paragraph C with the sub-amendment from Ms. Jeanette. So the new C would be online broadcasters with French language content, period. Do we agree with the sub-amendment? Yes. By consent? Carried. And now we return to the amendment. Yes, Mr. Beaulieu. I have another sub-amendment. I would put up to 2 meetings, because if we're going to add additional witnesses, it'll be difficult to fit them into 1 meeting. We could put down 2 meetings or even 3 if we're able to get 3. A minimum of 2, because that would allow you to have 3. A minimum of 2. Okay, hold at least 2 meetings. That will allow us to.
Donc, j'ai consulté avec
So I consulted the clerk. What I would say is that we ought, first of all, to resolve or decide what we're going to do with the original amendment. And then if you wish, you can present another amendment. I thought we carried it. We adopted a sub amendment. Now we're on the amendment. To the amendment. Now we're on the original amendment. Clerk, could you please read out the entire amendment? Thank you, Chair. After the words, the committee here at this meeting will mention companies such as Cogeco, Bell, RNC, and or Leclerc Communication, and we keep B, a representative ADISC, Association Québécoise de l'Industrie du Disque, du Spectacle et de la Vidéo, and then we add C, which says online broadcasters with French language content, and we add a point D that says broadcasters of ARCC, Alliance de Radio Communautaire du Canada.
adopter cet amendement.
Are we ready to adopt that amendment? Okay, we have unanimous consent. Yes. Very good then. So the amendment from Mr. Deschênes-Thériault is carried as amended. And now I return to Mr. Beaulieu. What you wish to move? I'd like to place one meeting to hold at least two meetings. Anyways, just to change it. So instead of one meeting, replace it by at least two meetings. Because it's true that it has a major impact if we, reduce the Francophone quotas. They're already not very well complied with. Are there any comments or speakers to the amendment? No? No discussion, no debate? Are we ready to adopt it? Do we agree?
D'accord. On devrait...
All right. We should always raise a flag more often, So we all agree?
La motion.
So now the entire motion has to be dealt with.
Juste pour être clair, je vais demander à la greffière de le lire.
Just to be clear, I'm going to ask the clerk to read out the entire motion, and then we'll decide if we want to adopt the motion. Madam Clerk, thank you. So pursuant to Standing Order 10839F of the Standing Committee on Official Languages, hold at least two meetings as soon as possible of 2 hours to examine the situation regarding the recent request by Cogeco to reduce quotas for French music content required by the conditions of their broadcast license. That as part of this meeting, the committee hear from A, broadcasters such as Cogeco, Bell, RNC, and or Leclerc Communication. B, a representative from l'ADISC, Association Québécoise de l'Industrie du Disque, du Spectacle et de la Vidéo. C, online broadcasters with French language content. D, broadcasters from the ARCC, Alliance de la Radio Communautaire du Canada. That the purpose of this meeting be to understand the current situation and to evaluate other possible solutions in order to respect the objective of stopping the decline of French. Mr. Beaulieu, actually, we're not necessarily closing the door to French language broadcasters because there's ADISC, there's the Community Association, the RCC. There could also be the UPA, not the UDA, sorry.
Okay.
Although agriculture is, well, nothing more. So I think that the motion closes the door.
En fait, Monsieur le Président, je pense que ça...
Actually, Chair, I think that it's a relevant question. I interpret it in the way he reads it. It doesn't limit us. We can go beyond in the sense that it's something I observe live. It's that there's only one representative of the industry, of the artistic community, and those companies that rely on Francophone songs. So does that limit us? I don't think so. But perhaps the clerk could tell us if we put forward witnesses that are outside of the people identified, but that have a connection with the topic, can that be justified?
Donc, les collègues, je suis conscient du temps.
So, colleagues, I'm aware of the time. I know that we want to wind up, but to solve this issue, we need a few minutes. So can you allow us to take a few minutes to solve this? First option, second option, we tried to solve it at a different meeting. I would like to move an amendment to the motion. Other concerned stakeholders. Well, we're moving ahead quickly, but I would put a sub amendment saying without restriction for the choice of witnesses. We'll protect ourselves. And if we invite someone from the UPA, then people can judge that it's not relevant. You know, it was an easy example, but I think we're all responsible. So a sub amendment from Mr. Godin. Do you agree with the sub amendment? Yes, yes, yes. Would you like to repeat it for the clerk?
Au niveau de-
Without restriction as regards, help me, Madam Clerk, without restriction, perhaps we could say,
On peut
or other representatives.
de l'air.
D is ARCC broadcasters, and then we would add we could add and other stakeholders in the field. Other stakeholders in the field. Okay? Fine. Now we have to adopt the motion. Do we need to have the clerk reread it? Do we agree to adopt the motion? Yes, we agree. Okay. Motion carried. Any further topics to be discussed? I have a question. Yes, Mr. Godin. Chair, the only thing I'd like to know is, are there any indications of the topic for next Thursday?
Ah, ça pas.
Bon, pour répondre à la question,
All right, to answer the question, as it's a report of the subcommittee that will determine our work, it is the continuing work on the continuum of education. That's the first thing that the clerk had planned. So I would ask the clerk, given the time and that we want to move forward and wind up the meeting, I would propose that the clerk send out a calendar to all colleagues so you can see what she is planning. And if there are any concerns, we could discuss it. All right.
En ce moment, il y a une consultation.
At the moment, there's a consultation of the CRTC. I'm not sure what are the limits. If the analyst or the clerk could check into that, and if it winds up quickly, perhaps we could, I think everyone agrees that we should move ahead quickly, and then we could start inviting the guests that are noted and move forward.
On vous laisse la latitude.
merci.
We'll leave you latitude on that. Thank you. Are we ready to adjourn? Very well. Meeting is adjourned.